screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood ones of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempt the mental robbery, executed sloppily. The pomp proceed as mockery and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful. Friends, welcome back to Rogue Ways. I'm Lindsay Sharman. I am a spiritual healer and teacher, spiritual guide. I do one-on-one sessions, healing sessions, past life reading sessions, sound healing sessions, and more. I connect you with your spiritual guides and allies, and I help you achieve whatever your life goals are, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. You can find everything I do at rogueways.org. And I invite you to come connect with me in my group events like the Lightning Oracle Round, where we get a message from the spiritual guides and allies. You get a specific message or your question answered from your specific spiritual guides and allies every other Tuesday, the first and third Tuesday of the month. You can book that type of a session in the same place you book the one-on-one sessions with me on rogueways.org under schedule a session. And all of my books are there on rogueways.org. The powerful orgone that I create is there on rogueways.org, unlike any orgone you will ever find anywhere else. Channeled through from the divine. My channel's writings are available on rogueways.substack.com. In fact, what we're going to talk about today is also a post on Substack, and rogueways.substack.com is in addition to millions of other posts that are fantastic, informative, spiritually available to you, and a lot of it is free. And if you want to support what I do and you love what I do, then you can also be a paid supporter and get a little bit of extra channeled messages and more there. So that's rogueways.substack.com. Thank you for all of you out there who are here. Thank you for being here and for being you. And let's talk about past lives. We're just going to dive right into it today. You know, I was called to work with past lives very specifically. And part of it is because I've remembered so many of my own past lives, and it has helped me heal so much in my life. And once we do something for ourselves, then we are more able to help other people do it. And this is the role of any healer or teacher, spiritual or otherwise. You have to sort of be the expert yourself before you can offer it to anyone else. And so my spiritual guides and allies very directly pushed me into doing past life work with people. But this came after, I remembered many of my own past lives, and we'll talk about a few of them today just as examples of how it can help you in this current life to work with past lives. But there's a lot of people who, especially in the spiritual community at large, believe that the past shouldn't be something you even associate with. Right? There's this whole, the only reality is here and now. The present is a gift and everything else isn't real. And that's all the illusion. And we get caught in the illusion, and, that we should just let go of the past, move forward without it, and be free of it. And it's a very nice sentiment. And it kind of understands the spiritual reality we're living in, but it ignores a lot about the spiritual reality we're living in as well. You can't actually just cut off the past. It did actually happen. And so it is actually there. And so, when we actually dissociate from our past and we just let it go because we want to live in the now, it's actually very unhealthy to do that. It is ideal that we do understand that there is a distinct past, present, and future, and that living in the now is the best choice. And we can't do that well if we have a bunch of unhealed trauma in the past, or if we're constantly fearful of the future. So, right. So it is actually true. The past and the future, they're sort of like the outside of this path of here and now that we're on, right? And we're always here and now. And that's true. Sometimes we've left pieces of ourselves in the past. We've left unhealed pieces of ourselves in the past. And, psychologically, we work on this with therapists, right? With psychologists, with psychiatrists. We work on healing and reintegrating the past. And if you've ever worked with PTSD or any kind of depression, a lot of this is actually going back and sort of re-understanding what happened to us and bringing it back into alignment with how we feel here and now. And that's the sort of more materialist scientific view of how to do that. Then in the spiritual world, we have other tools we can use as well. And they're very similar in goal, in that we want to literally go back and retrieve something from the past and bring it back to here and now. We can't be whole here and now if we have pieces of ourselves left in traumatic experiences and woundings from the past. And we all do. So we just do. If we didn't, like I always say, if we were done with this process, we would be floating balls of light in our Merkaba, and we wouldn't need to incarnate incorporeally. We wouldn't be bodies, right? We would just be consciousness floating around. So we do. And it doesn't help us to ignore that. It doesn't help us. In fact, we're, again, ignoring a part of ourself. And the more we ignore it, the worse it gets, the harder it gets, the darker it gets, the more twisted it gets. So our goal is actually to connect the past to the now, connect the future to the now, and live in this holistic place here and now where we are whole. So when we go to the past and we grab pieces of ourselves and we bring it back to now, and in the spiritual parlance, sometimes we call that a soul retrieval. You may have heard of soul retrievals, and that's what you're actually doing. You're literally going back and grabbing pieces of yourself and bringing it back to now. Again, in psychiatry, they do this. They just call it a different thing. In the spiritual world, we do that. That's one of the things we call it. I call it time traveling. We go back and we literally can talk to our past self, go back into the experience, reframe it, bring back pieces of it to here and now, and bring it into our current consciousness, our current conscious flow and understanding of self. And now we're in the here and now. Now we are in the here and now. And so that's our goal, is to integrate the past into the now. We're going to leave the future out of this for a moment, because we're not, we can work with manifestation. We can work with bringing in the best timeline. We can work with that sort of stuff. And it's sort of similar. We don't want to be anxious or fearful about the future. That doesn't serve us. But we are allowed to think about the future and still remain in the present moment as a whole being. So, the people who say, forget about the past, forget about the future, just live in the now, they're kind of ignoring this really important process where we actually are interdimensional beings and we do transcend time. And so we want to actually be aware of how to do that well. And so this is the goal, actually, of the work I do with people with past life healing, is to reach into the past and heal it, bring it back into the present moment so that we can be whole, right? We don't want to regret. We don't want to feel shame about the past. We don't want to be stuck in the past mentally and be reliving it over and over again in the now. That's not healthy. We don't want to fear and feel anxious about the future and project that sort of stuff out forward. That's also not healthy. But we do want to be aware of the past. We do want to reintegrate it into the now. So this is the goal. And when we have past lives, which we all do, all of those past lives are affecting us right now. Some of them are sort of, let's just call them complete, or they are healed, or they are integrated. And so there's nothing left to really do with them. They're all good, right? It was a good life, or it was an easier life, or those lessons have just been understood, and there's just nothing left to heal or to do. But especially if we have wounds that are unhealed in past lives, then our current life, we are experiencing the karma of that. We're experiencing the suffering of that. And we're recreating situations that will remind us to heal that. And so we are being affected by our unhealed past life wounds right now. And we can do something about that. So again, that's why I've been called to do this work, because we have so many things that are affecting us, and they remain hidden from us. They remain in the shadow until we see them, heal them, and integrate them. And I want to be very clear that you don't have to do past life healing work to do this. It is a way of sort of approaching the problem of dissociated aspects of self that are not yet integrated. But you can also do that by healing this current life and the past experiences and wounds you've had in this current life, because they're the same thing. So there are people who will never know they had past lives and will heal their past lives without knowing it. When we go back into a past life and we find trauma and we bring back the piece of self, we do soul retrieval, we do reintegration of self, it heals the wound of that life. but it also heals the similar experiences of this current life. And you can flip that right around and you can say, when I heal some aspect of myself right here and right now, even if I don't know, the similar experiences that I've had in other lives are also healing and releasing and reintegrating into my central energy flow. So it's easier than you think, actually. And people are doing it all the time, whether they know it or not. So when we feel called to do past life work, it's because for whatever reason, that is the way that we will more easily sort of come back to that place of wholeness. But it's not true for everyone. If someone has like sort of no spiritual belief system or ideology or understanding of self, that's not going to be helpful for them to come up to them and say, "Hey, past life, here's your past life." That's not helpful for them. But for you, right, if you know that you've had past lives, it might actually end up being a shortcut to healing some of the trauma and the wounds and the negative personality traits that you've developed in this current life. And that's what I see so often with the work I do with people. I feel very blessed to be able to help people to do that work. I think sometimes people come to me just excited about the idea of past lives and they just do a past life reading. They're just expecting to sort of hear some description of a past life, and that's not really what I do. It's often very confronting. There's often some wounds, and they're often resonating with the wounds you have in this life. So it's emotional. And I tell people, like, what I do is therapy. If you're not ready for a therapy session, you probably don't want to work with me because that's what we're going to do. And the vast majority of people are going to experience some emotional confliction or confrontation with what comes up, if not outright rejection and resistance, right? But that's where the healing is. It's actually right in those places of darkness and shadows where we want to bring the light, because that's where we get the most transformation. We'll find that our relationships change in this life. We'll find that we stop attracting the type of person that was actually like a past life sort of experience, and then we'll transcend relationship archetypes and patterns. Will transcend even physical healing will transform for people because of wounds from past lives, physical and otherwise, right? We can have emotional wounding in a past life that creates a physical wound in this life. It gets so deeply lodged in our energy body that it becomes physical, right? People have, for example, throat chakra blockages, and that can have come from a physical throat wound, right? Or vice versa. They could have been silenced in lives over and over again so often that then in this life they lose their voice all the time. Physical, right? Physical transformation. So we are affected on every layer of being by the things that occur in this life and in every life. And our physical manifestations are echoing in our mental experiences, are echoing in our emotional body, are echoing on a spiritual level, and in our relationships and experiences that we draw towards us in this life. We're actually always manifesting. We're just almost always doing it unconsciously. So we're bringing back to ourselves over and over again the same things until we identify it, we accept it for what it is, and we release it and let it move on. And that's what integrating is, right? I have many articles about healing and the steps to healing on my Substack, and I'm sure you'll hear me talk about it so many times if you stick around long enough. And this is no different. It's just a more sort of metaphysical way of coming about to the same level of healing. So these echoes are coming after us from all of our lives if we haven't yet healed it. Once we heal it, it's gone. It's done. It won't follow us anymore in this life, and it won't come back in future lives. Like, we have transcended it. So, sometimes it might feel like a little bit much or a little bit hard to do this healing work, but you don't ever lose the progress you make. So it's always worth moving into the progress. So I'll just tell you a couple of my own past life memories to give you an example of how things can shift in this current life. In this case, actually, so much shifted in this current life for me and for another person. So in this past life memory that I have, I am a woman, and sometime actually in like the 50s or so, and I am a really horrible person, really deeply flawed person, very vain, very self-centered, and very aloof, elitist. The person who I was a partner with, and we were criminals. We ran drugs together. And the person who was my partner was a man, and he was shorter than me and smaller than me. And he adored me eternally, deeply, deeply in love with me, but also just in lust with me. And I loved that because I could control him. And it was horrible. It was horrible to see myself in this way. And when you drop into, if you've ever had a past life memory come back up for you, it's usually for me in a state of deep meditation or a state of out of body sort of astral travel, or as a vision that just suddenly sort of strikes through. It can also happen. And if you've had these sorts of experiences, like once you drop in, like you just are that person. So in the experience itself, I don't have judgment of myself. It's only once I come back out and I look back and I go, ew, I was like that. And this is often true in past lives. You see yourself in ways you never wanted to, or that just really don't seem like you. And I hear people say this to me a lot when they receive their past life reading from me. Like, I'm not like that. I'm like, I know. I'm not like any of my past lives either. We don't stay the same. We have echoes of experiences, relationships, patterns, but we're not the same person. Every time we're growing, we're changing. We're not always the same sex. We're not always the same, right? So of course we're different people. No, you're not this person. But when you're in the memory, if you have the memory come back to yourself, you are that person. And you don't have a memory. I don't have a memory of Lindsay Sharman when I'm in these experiences. I only have the experience of being this person. So in this life, I just was doing my thing, being elitist, treating this person like crap, like I had for years. I knew that in the moment, even that this had been going on for so long and I could control this person, and very disgusting, manipulative energy. And very unexpectedly, that person broke a pool cue in the bar that we were in. No one else was there with us at the moment, and they stabbed me in the back with it. It actually punctured through. It was quite painful and devastating. I was then brutalized in other ways for a while and then died. So I experienced all of that, and I was murdered by this person. It makes sense, but I didn't see it coming. I came out of that experience and I'm me, and now I have this trauma of having experienced being murdered, which is its own process to go through. It's quite confronting in many ways and very traumatizing in its own way. But then I also have this experience of judging myself then and saying, what a horrible person I was. And of course, somebody might want to murder you. If you for years have strung them along and treated them poorly and used them and manipulated them and just were so full of yourself and just awful, no excuse. You still shouldn't murder, right? And at the same time, like, I get why. I totally get why. Me then, horrified. It's still kind of like, I guess I could have seen this coming. And it was very awful too. I felt a deep regret that I was dying in this way too soon. And that there was so much I could have done differently, and that I never really enjoyed life. So all of these things sort of came back to me in this memory. Well, unbeknownst to me, I met a friend in this current life just a few years ago. And, it was one of those types of things where you meet somebody and you just connect really quickly and deeply. And so this was like my new best friend, and we were like so excited to know each other and like, right. And often when that's that easy and the relationship is that strong, this is a past life person, right? That you have karma with, that you have experiences with. And that's why your souls already know each other. So on this level, it's like just so easy to connect. And so it was that kind of experience. So I kind of knew, right? I'm spiritually experienced enough at this point that I'm like, well, there's something else to this relation, this friendship. It's not just a friendship. And I don't mean that it's more than friends. I just mean that there's something else going on here. I knew there was some sort of karmic or something. And eventually that person did too. And they actually asked first, they said, what past lives do you think we've shared? And as soon as they asked, I realized that it was this life. And I was like, oh, no. And I was like, so who was this friend? Well, this friend was that person. And so interesting that that we had a similar dynamic in that I didn't take this person for granted because I was very aware once I realized I was like, okay, this person is then maybe going to, um, really adore me as a friend and maybe like want to spend more time with me. And then maybe I might be liable to treat them in a way that makes them feel not valued enough. Right? And that is what happened. And it wasn't a fault of mine, and it wasn't a fault of this person's either. It was just that our souls were like, let's arrange this just so you can wonder if you're valued enough, right? And you can see how you need to be aware of other people's feelings a bit more and not be selfish and how you dole out your time or your affection or your anything. Um, and so we both got to experience similar sorts of things in a totally different way, right? Very different. We weren't running drugs together. There was no sort of sexual thing going on, but similar otherwise, right? The vibrational signatures were there. The emotional similarities were there. The experiences and the needs were there. But this time we were able to transcend them. I was able to give enough attention and affection so that that person didn't feel like they were undervalued or not valued. They were able to become angry at me for things, but not violently lash out at me or hold me accountable for their needs, right? Because that's actually the truth. Even though I treated this person poorly in that past life, they never had the right to kill me over it. Right? You have to take care of yourself, and then you have to take care of your own needs, and then you can't expect other people to provide this for you. So we got to play this out in a miniature sort of much safer sort of way, much lower stakes, but come up against the same sorts of things and then choose differently and transcend them. I also, we both were in a spiritually aware sort of place. So we were doing forgiveness practices and, releasing it on other levels too, which is very powerful and things that I suggest and teach any of my clients or people to use as tools for themselves when they're doing this type of work as well. So there's other reasons why we are also able to release it. But it's funny because again, actual person I met, actual dynamic occurred, actual healing took place in this life. And then that past life began to sort of release an intensity in my field because we had finally overcome it, right? We had overcome the karma and the pattern and had made different choices. So in this life currently, I'd had this sort of shoulder pain right where that stab occurred. And it would come up anytime that I was not taking care of myself and liable to therefore harm someone else, right? Which is a complicated thing too. A lot of us have to figure out, right? So it would kind of come up in that scenario in a sort of codependent sort of way. And I don't have that anymore. So once I met this person and was able to transcend that, not only was I healing it emotionally, behaviorally, right, consciously, but I had physical pains leave my body as this all healed and released. So again, the past matters so much, actually. The unhealed pieces of the past have to come back to now, and you can heal physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all of the above, all at once, and relationally, right? My behaviors and choices with people and relationships change as I grow, as do yours, as do everyone's. So that was a good one to remember. I had another one, and this was again one of the first past lives that I remembered in great detail. And it was a pretty horrible one as well. At some point I was like, why do I only remember horrible past lives? And it's because I'm remembering the things I need to heal. I don't need to remember the happy lives because they're all good, right? I don't need to remember the things that aren't stuck in time and stuck in my field and continuing to cause blockage, because that's not where my attention is needed. It's needed in these places where the wound is so deep, it continues to echo through time. So in this life, I remembered I was, it seemed like medieval sorts of times, and I was working spiritually or religiously, I should say, and politically for the church, the Roman Catholic Church, and I was a torturer. It wasn't during the Inquisition. It was actually much before then. So I don't know how much is written or recorded about that, but it apparently happened. And, stone walls, stone buildings, and very proud to do this work. Very proud, very heartfelt, like patriotic feelings in me to do this work. And again, when you're in the past life memory, for me, I just am this person. I'm not Lindsay. I don't remember the future. I'm just this person. And so, all I know is I'm proud to be me. I'm proud to serve the church, my, country and kinsmen, and do this noble work of driving evil out of the land. That's what I knew I was doing. I just felt so good about it, and I was torturing human beings. And I experienced doing that, and I experienced not so much enjoyment of it, like, not like a sociopathic, psychopathic, enjoyment of it, but a fulfillment in it, and that's really disturbing. I mean, that in itself is its own kind of trauma once I came back to conscious Lindsay, was understanding that you could feel fulfilled by doing such things to other people. Deeply disturbing. I can't even express how horrible it was for many, many days to live with that experience, just that experience. Just traumatizing to bring back. In that experience, I actually did have an awakening, though. At some point, for some reason, I just realized, it just like struck me out of the blue that this was just a person, and that I was just a person, and that I wouldn't ever want this to be done to me, and that this person did not feel like they were evil and were trying to be evil, and that I could also be perceived to be evil by someone else of a different point of view. Like, it just all struck me at once, and I kind of broke, and I left for the day, like left to go home, and the whole way home I was having this existential crisis of realizing I don't think I can live anymore. Not even primarily because I was struck with guilt at what I had done to people, although that was a piece of it. Realizing the horror of it was a piece of it. But it was also that I would be killed or tortured or worse, excommunicated. I'm not even sure, cast out. All the friends and family I'd ever known would no longer love me or accept me. I would be seen as evil. I would lose everything just by not being able to continue to torture other people. And so I wanted to kill myself, but that was evil. So I was in this trap, actually. And I got ragingly drunk, and in a drunken stupor, I began to leave that experience and become current Lindsay Sharman again. And so there was just this strange moment where I was coming out of that being, which was me in the past, but I was me now. And I was just looking at myself then. And I was sort of trying to like yell at him, who was me, don't kill yourself. It just makes it worse. Don't do it. Like, if they need to excommunicate you, get excommunicated. If your wife leaves you, let her leave you. If your friends abandon you, let them abandon you. If they torture you, let them torture you. Just don't kill yourself. It will just make it worse. And it seemed to work. He seemed to sort of like hear it or understand it in the drunken haze, that something was telling him, like, very clearly. His higher self was telling him very clearly what to do. And I don't think I did kill myself in that life. There's a little victory there. When I came back, like I said, it was very, very difficult to integrate that into this reality and accept that about myself. And to think that I could do something like that. And in a way, it helped so much, actually. In a way, as I was integrating, I was realizing, this is what we're always told, that everybody everywhere is just doing their best. And even if we look at them and say, how could you ever do that, you evil monster? There is a situation in which we have done the same or would do the same. So every mistake we've made too. It really brings you down a notch or two if you have any holier than thou energies left within you. There's no one left to judge when you've seen yourself as the monster. Right? And you've seen how you can make these same mistakes. There, but by the grace of God go I, is what they say, right? And it's true. And so I had seen me make these mistakes, and I now understood. And my whole life, I had actually wondered, like, how do people do things like this? And now I was like, oh, here's one way, right? There's one reason why. And I had to forgive myself. I had to do forgiveness practice with myself. I did forgiveness practice with those victims, and this helped to relieve it too. But it, for some reason, took me a little bit, a couple days, a week, or some time to recognize that I had been tortured in this current life as Lindsay Sharman. And it's not like I didn't know. It's not like I had forgotten. It's just that I just didn't connect them right away. I was too busy dealing with the trauma of remembering this past life in general. And then I was able to connect it to my experiences as a child. I experienced physical, serial, sadistic torture. Um, and that's been one of the defining moments of this current life. And it's a horrible thing to go through. It's a horrible thing to deal with. It's, trauma, all of this, lots of healing, and part of why I'm able to be a healer now as well. Again, I've healed some of the darkest things in myself already. So there's gifts in there even through the darkness, but I also help me understand karma, because my whole life I was like, why did he do that to me? Like, what's wrong with him? I mean, like, what is it? You can't just blame everything on demons. They're out there, and they'll have something to do with it, of course, if something evil's going on, and they're feeding off of it at the least. And even if they're motivating really awful behavior in people, the person's still responsible. No one is free of their free will exists, right? They're not free of their choices. So I was like, why? And now I understood. Oh, he was one of my victims way back then. And here he was back. And it's not so much like exacting revenge. I mean, I don't know how his soul saw it exactly. And he did this to many people. Many people in my community actually experienced the same at his hands. And so it's, I don't think all of them had tortured him in the past, but maybe, I don't know, right? But it's also to say, like, what you create exists until you resolve it. And I had created torture and I hadn't resolved it. And so here it was back in my face to say, here I am, you haven't resolved this. It feels harsh to people. It feels especially confronting to people. People will often get angry, really reject this idea that what we experience in this life is something we've created for ourselves. And it is. And that's what karma means. It's cause and effect. You create something, there it is, right? And sometimes it takes many lives to come back to you, but here it is. So everything that is here in front of you is of your creation, even if you don't know it. And this was a really profound lesson in that. So I got to understand karma, understand how lifetimes, transcend, these patterns follow us, how other souls come back to us, and our victims become our persecutors and vice versa, until we really heal it, really integrate it, and really release it. And then we're free from it, right? Then we're free from the pattern. It doesn't come back. I won't be tortured again. I won't be torturing again. Those things won't happen to me ever again, because I have healed them actually. Right. And this was part of that process. So a really beautiful experience, actually, in the end, even as difficult as it was. And finally, I'll share this example also. And I write about each of these on my Substack as well. So if you're interested in these types of things, they come out from time to time on my Substack. So rogueways.substack.com is the place to go. And if you want to find this specific post, it's called The Ionian Keeper of the Flame. And this was a past life memory that came back to me pretty unexpectedly, like the rest, but in a different way. I was invited to do a past life remembrance meditation. And I sort of was like, well, I already have remembered so many past lives. I don't really need to, but I'll join in with the group. Right. And then I did actually remember a really profound past life. And in this life, I was in the Ionian culture, which is around, the Turkey sort of area of Mediterranean, and, in the past, 1,000 or so years BCE or before Christ. And so I was a keeper of the flame. And again, I don't know if this is written about in history or what they might call it or how it has come down through time. But in my experience, I was a woman who looked much like this image you see here. And I was in I think right now we'd think of it as a secret society, but back then it would have just been thought of more like a church. Like, this is your church, this is your spiritual community, and not everyone is called to it. Not everyone is called to this work. There's kind of more generalized celebrations and rituals that the whole community would be a part of, and then there's sort of like a different class or group of people who are seeking something deeper, right? So I was one of those people, and you could have called me a sort of priestess if that terminology was around. And we worked in caves, and we did things with snakes would be around. That was one of our symbols that was really important. Grapes were very important. And I remember doing rituals. I remember a lot of it would be working with sexual energy, which is somewhat taboo. A lot of people think that's dark or evil, but it wasn't in this life, at least. Um, it wasn't prostitution or anything. It was much different from that, but it was just working with the sexual energies of the body and using it to fuel transcendent states of mind. And this is something that people do even today. There's all kinds of schools that teach spiritual transcendence through the harnessing of the sexual energy. It's not the same as sex magic necessarily. It's just another type of way of working with your own internal energies. So, if you ever worked with or heard of or thought about Kundalini energy, same thing. So a lot of people work with it without calling it sexual energy as well. They call it the creative life force energy. Same thing. So in this life, we were working with that energy. We were worshiping and working together in various ways. And we were often working in this cave system. And in the memory, I went deep, deep, deep into some of the cave systems, and it was pitch black, no light with me. And I would find pools of water. We all used them. It wasn't like I was discovering them. They were sacred spaces. And these pools of water are deep back in these caves. And I would float in them after having risen up my energy through my central energy column and brought it up to, the level of the third eye and the crown, which is the goal of some of this work. And so I would be in a sort of altered state, and I would be back floating in complete darkness in these pools of water. So deeply powerful spiritual experiences would happen where I would be essentially out of body, floating around in the astral and doing these things. And at the time, whatever words we were using for that, it was not the same words, but, we knew that we were accomplishing something of a higher level and, communicating with the gods. And we'd bring back messages, and we'd bring back, cures for things. And it's very shamanic in that way, that we're going somewhere and coming back, and real information was coming through. So really, really interesting life. And at some point that area was threatened. An earthquake struck, floods occurred. My village itself and that specific cave system was wiped out. But there's something else too, in that I understood and I received as a psychic download and an image or a message that there was a group of people that would be coming for us. We'll leave that as nondescript as it is. But I knew that my heritage was in danger. My spiritual tradition was in danger. And so I left, and I ran, and I ran alone. All the people who I had worked with my whole life in this way were dead from this horrible earthquake and this flood. So I was alone, and I ran. I eventually ran into somebody who was a soulmate who I know in this current life now. And he just was very strongly drawn to assist me in my desire to get to the ocean, which I had never been to, but had heard of. And I just knew I was getting this message that to escape the people who seemed to be after me, I would need to get to the ocean. And there was something important I would need to do there. And so I went to the ocean with this man who pretended to be my husband, because it wasn't safe to travel alone as a woman, or because it was just easier for us to get around if we were pretending to be married. But he knew I was like not, and this was part of my tradition for some reason. Like I wouldn't marry. I was a virgin. And I was a virgin. I'm not just, I said that in quotes for no reason. Like I was an actual virgin as well. And so And so I couldn't actually get married, but he was willing to pretend to be married to me, to protect me, to get me out to the coast. There's no reason. There's like no real reason. This is just a soul level agreement that we did this. We got on a boat eventually. He got a job on the boat. I was also technically employed by serving the men food and cleaning up. And we got out to the ocean right off the coast of Africa. And in the middle of the night, on a full moon, I was called by these higher forces to jump into the ocean. It was stormy, and to float in the same way I would have done in the cave. And that something about that was putting the information of everything that my tradition had carried or gathered or created for humanity or developed within ourselves, like into this field that the ocean would carry so that it wouldn't be lost. And I died doing that happily, knowing that I had carried out my purpose. That's the life that came back to me in this meditation, where I expected not to remember anything because I had already remembered so many past lives that I thought, well, this is just not necessary. My past lives come back to me when they need to, not when I'm going looking for them, right? And here it was like, no, it'll come back to you then also if it needs to. And so that was this life that was so powerful. And in that life, I really understood, by remembering that life, I just received so much spiritual healing in remembering what it felt like to feel as though I were carrying this burden of humanity on my shoulders and doing it alone, right? Because as a healer, as a teacher, this is sometimes what it feels like, that you've got this duty to carry out, and that humanity has a lot to receive and to grow through, and that you are at least somewhat responsible for doing your best to share that with people, help people heal and grow, right? And it feels kind of lonely sometimes. People will say all the time, right? The spiritual path, as you go far enough, becomes very lonely. And it's not because there's not other people there with you. I mean, I have people in my life, and but this specific spiritual dimension, you basically do it alone. You don't do it with other people. All that work, that remembering of the past life, I do that alone. I can share it with you, but you weren't there. You didn't help me do it, right? And you will have the same experiences in your life as you're healing these things, and as you're moving forward, and as you're, rising up in your ascendance, you are also doing it alone. In the end, we're all doing it alone. We're walking each other home, but we're walking home alone. Actually, we're the ones who have to take each step. We're the ones who are going to be there when we die. We're going to be surrounded by people the whole time and love the whole time. And you're never actually alone, but you're always alone. My spiritual guides, the spiritual ancestors who I've been in communication with my whole life, they have said many times in the channel messages, it's not true unless it's a paradox. This is one of them. You're surrounded by people, you're never alone, and you're doing it alone. You're alone. So there's this weird loneliness, there's this weird duty, there's this weird sort of heaviness to that, and this profundity to that I was able to also heal and bring back into focus in this current life. And just remember, oh yeah, it can feel lonely, but you're never alone. It can feel like it's too big of a job, but it's not. You're just supposed to do the part you can do, right? So it was very healing too to remember this. And not quite as traumatic as some of those other ones. So it was kind of nice too. There's some trauma there, but just a little bit lighter, not so much a horrible person type of trauma. So that was nice to experience myself as something pretty positive too. And these aren't linear in time. It's very interesting. So I will have had this life so long ago that it seems very exalted and a lot higher spiritual accomplishment. And then much, much later, I'm treating people like crap, dirty enough that they want to stab me in the back and kill me, literally. So, this looks like, how did you go up and down like this? But this, in my experience, is not as linear as it might seem. In time, I can say this one occurred first, but I can't actually say where my soul went in what order. In fact, if you're looking at me remembering these lives and integrating them back into this current life and healing my relationships, my body, my emotions, my mind in this current life, that has not happened linearly at all. right? Which life I remember and which parts of it I remember and which part I'm healing are very much not linear. So it's non-linear, and that is how healing is. It's not linear. If it was, everybody would do it quite easily all the time, and that's not what's happening. So that was the Ionian Keeper of the Flame, a little bit different type of healing, a little bit different type of assistance in this current life. But you can see again how the patterns can echo, similar things can come back to you. And that's part of what the process is, of looking into the past and bringing it back into the future. And again, this is our shadow. We talk about the shadow in psychology is the part of yourself you don't see. That's what this is. So that when your past lives come up, they're always bringing something to your attention. When I do a past life reading with someone, I don't know them. I don't know exactly what they need, not consciously, right? I just do the reading, and what comes through is something they needed to see about themselves that was hidden or occluded in some way. And now they can see it in many ways. They can see it in this past life, and they can see how it's similar to things they've experienced in this current life. And now they can start to sort of unravel the shadow, right? Our shadow self, our hidden self. The shadow is never bad. There's some dark stuff in there, like as in things that we've done that made horrible mistakes, things we don't want to admit, things we don't want to see. That's why they're in the shadow. But it's not a negative thing. It's just where we put all the stuff we couldn't deal with yet. We put it in the shadow. Now we're bringing this flashlight over and we're saying, what's over there in the shadow? Oh, wow, that's over there. Okay, that's why I have this problem or that problem. That's why I have this relationship or that. That's why I have this pattern over and over again, because this thing was in the shadow. This relationship type was in the shadow. This behavior was in the shadow. This personal failing was in the shadow. This trauma that hurt so bad that I couldn't carry it with me was in the shadow. And so our goal is to look to see what's in the shadow so that we can bring it back up into the present, integrate it into our consciousness and experience, and start transforming and releasing those things so we don't carry them anymore, so that we do become brighter. And we are basically, as we do this process of bringing the shadow into integration, we are harmonizing our past lives with our present, creating a better future for ourselves, an easier path forward, and lightening our load. We're lightening the shadow. We are becoming enlightened. And people ask me, like, if you had to give the short answer of what the spiritual path is, what is it? And every time I say the same thing, it's healing. It's healing. And if you're not a floating ball of light yet, you have things to heal. That is exactly why you're here. There's nothing else going on but this integration of past, present, and future, of your past lives with your current life, of this harmonization across lives, and the dissolution of negative patterns, the dissolution of the shadow, the bringing of light into the dark. It's what we're doing here. It is what enlightenment is. It is what ascendance is. You can do anything else you want, and it will all come back to you're healing yourself. You're healing yourself. You're giving yourself time and space to heal, the types of habits that support healing and integration, or you're actively healing these unhealed wounds. They're all the same thing. They're all going to heal you physically, like that shoulder part that released. They're going to heal you mentally, like how you see other people. They're going to heal you emotionally, like you are releasing the wound itself. They're going to heal you spiritually, because you will become whole here and now. So you can't ignore the past. You can't just say all that exists is now, and therefore I'm not thinking about the past. You can if you've healed the past. But again, you probably haven't finished doing that. So you're probably still doing that. And that is what we're here to do. And I help you do that. So if you are looking for support in that process, you can get any of my soul services, including my past life tarot readings, and all of my healing services at rogueways.org. You can schedule them directly at calendly.com/rogueways, or you can go to rogueways.org and click on schedule a session or book a session, and it will take you to the scheduling page where you can choose any of those things. The Lightning Oracle Tuesdays are also there. That is a schedulable session. It's just a group session. So everybody comes together. We all get a message from our spiritual guides and allies. You get your question answered or a message received. And it's super accessible and beautiful. So I hope to see you there some Tuesday, first and third Tuesday of every month. And again, if you want to read the channeled messages that come through my channel from the spiritual ancestors, the ascended masters, you can get those on rogueways.substack.com. And that is what I would like to invite you to do. Again, this is the most important work that we can do, and we can help each other do it. It's just, we are doing it alone in the end. You are doing it for you in the end. But as every ascended master has said throughout time, as you heal all of yourself, you heal all of the world. So thank you for being here and being you. Come and connect with me at rogueways.org. And until next time, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah.
Glued to these screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood ones, the holly suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. Hypocrisy, this mockery, and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.